Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and nutrition professor of almost 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder. We have a special episode this week. Everyone is on the road, so I'm going to offer three achievements in training, is what we often call it, but really just three things that I've learned before the break. After the break, we'll simply go over to Phil instead of having an open-ended discussion, and he's recorded three things that he has learned. Now, Phil is no doubt going to focus on training and what he's doing in the gym and with his athletes, so I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on nutrition-type things or just general observations, sort of from the academic or science world. Although I'll tell you, my legs are absolutely wrecked just getting a chance to squat again. Sometimes work will really pull you away from the consistency that you need. But I digress. Lesson number one for me in these past couple of weeks has been that short periods of simply not eating. I hate to say fasting because that brings to mind purposeful day-long fasts, things of that nature, but just, we'll call it 3 squares for fat loss. And part of this was reinforced by two things. One is on Thursdays I'm doing what Chris Shugart calls a pulse fast with a friend of mine at work. We're simply sipping whey protein spiked with a little bit of leucine every 90 minutes or so. But honestly, it's not the constant intake that's the focus. It's getting out from under an insulin burden, if you will. We live in a high refined carbohydrate, high insulin environment, and I just think getting out from under that constant insulin and blood glucose pressure, if you will, not to burn fat in your blood, very handy when it comes to leanness.
Strength and muscle sport news.
The new information that I learned regarding this was a paper that came out by Hagel, Hagele, and colleagues in the Nutrition and Diabetes Journal, Nutrition and Diabetes, Volume 8, Number 19, just came out, but it's entitled High Orange Juice Consumption with or Between Meals Differently Affects Energy Balance in Healthy Subjects. So they're essentially looking at this idea is what happens when you're in a constant state of higher blood sugar and your pancreas is on overdrive secreting insulin. As listeners know over past weeks, Dr. Nelson and I have been talking about how insulin is sort of a fuel selector, right? When insulin is high, when your blood glucose gets high enough or it's always high, your pancreas is responding, secreting insulin, and that really, it turns the knob away from fat oxidation, from fat burning as a fuel source. So being in a fed state all the time, it might be handy to really try to minimize muscle breakdown, but it's not going to be very helpful for fat loss. But so what they did was they took, they started with a statement that said sugar-containing beverages like orange juice can be a risk factor for obesity or type 2 diabetes, although underlying mechanisms are less clear. So again, they gave orange juice either with or in between meals. And they looked at different markers over a 4-week crossover intervention. So for 4 weeks, the subjects who were there were 26 healthy adults, average weight. They consumed 20% of their calorie requirement as OJ, and again, either with a meal, so adding to the load of that meal, right? So you're going to have higher glucose and insulin responses probably during those meals, but again, between the meals, they wouldn't consume anything. Then they crossed over after a washout period, and they tried it the other way, where that same amount, that same dose of grams of carbohydrate in orange juice was consumed between their meals. Long story short, after the between meal intervention, the subjects got fatter. Fat mass increased about 1 kilogram, so that's not a lot, right? We're talking about 2.5 pounds-ish, but it was statistically significant. So reliably got slightly fatter with that constant blood sugar environment, right? Higher blood sugar environment. By contrast, after the within meal intervention, so just having the same calorie load but with their meals, their body fat went down 1/3 of a kilogram. So not even a pound, right? We're talking about 4 weeks here. So you have to be very careful measuring body comp in short duration studies like this. But there was also some reduced liver stress in the form of an enzyme called GGT. So they looked at day-long glycemia, so blood sugar levels, insulin secretion, changes in basal insulin sensitivity. If you look across the whole day, or blood triglycerides, there were no differences, right? It averaged out across the course of the day, but it didn't on their waistline, right? It was setting the stage. Now, it's not a long intervention. We don't know how long this would continue. But again, to me, it really reinforces this idea that you might want to do short periods of simply not eating instead of constantly having that sugary, coffee in your hand, like that caramel macchiato type thing, or and even an energy drink. You're drinking it to stay alert or maybe even burn fat, but not if it's the sugary kind. In any case, it says juice consumption in between meals may contribute to gains in body fat and have adverse metabolic effects. So that's my first lesson. Again, I've seen it by trying to get out from under constant eating on Thursdays with, the low dose whey protein and leucine, sort of pulse it in every so often. Or just not eating, between breakfast and lunch, for example. I get up quite early, maybe 4:30-ish. I'll have some breakfast on my way out the door to the lab or on my way to work, and then not eat, really. Sugarless coffee throughout the morning, probably, but no calories, really, until about noon. And just having that few hours, especially during that time where you're really likely to secrete excess insulin, right, in those morning hours, helps with leanness. It's very interesting. It's almost like that 1970s, 1980s 3 squares a day idea. It's sort of wisdom, perhaps. And again, for reckless weight gain, mass gain, probably not. I'd be eating constantly, not caring if my blood sugar and insulin were high all the time, or actually preferring that. But for fat loss, maybe 3 squares is good. The second thing I'd like to touch on came up in a talk that I was giving, just yesterday in West Virginia at the American Society of Exercise Physiologists meeting, and that's, have we lost something? This is sort of general philosophy here, but if you go back 100 years, 200 years, maybe a couple hundred, you see small groups kind of clustering throughout history doing amazing things. People were, like, for example, let's discuss like Ben Franklin, statesman, inventor, author, all of the above, right? If you go back and you look at like the cohort, Edmund Halley, right? Robert Hooke, Newton. Newton wanted to know something, so he invented calculus so he could figure it out. Invented calculus. I mean, it's hard enough to study that stuff for students these days. Robert Hooke, in that cohort, invented the microscope, coined the word cell. Not kidding. Edmund Halley would look into what are the commercial applications of some of what he and then Hooke were doing with like vacuum pumps and things like that. So he created a diving bell and guinea pigged himself by going underwater underneath this, bell with air in it and testing it out. But again, the point being is, I think sometimes in the sciences our students have lost that drive to be inventors and discoverers. A lot of times what we do in an academic setting is we study something, we make it into a poster or a manuscript that maybe a few dozen to a few hundred people will view, and then we sort of submit it for filing and move on. And the impact on the world is fairly minor. I think that's one of the reasons that we keep doing IronRadio, right? We have tens of thousands of people who tune in, and we feel like we can do a little more good. So I'm just going to suggest to listeners, think about being an inventor, a discoverer, an explorer in some way. I think maybe we've lost some of that in our tamed down society. I think that's part of the impetus, in fact, why I was interested in this coffee brew method that I've been talking about on the podcast recently. The actual act of moving beyond sharing some science in a poster or a manuscript or doing a lecture and turning it into a product that might help real people in real settings, it takes extra effort, but the impact is much larger. And my third thing that I've learned, just to bring this to a close here because I don't want to go on too long, is my appreciation for that. The legality, the safety, when you want to roll something out to the public, a method, right? You can patent a product, you can also patent a method. And there's a lot that goes into this, working with lawyers, getting the right paperwork in place, the safety and the efficacy testing. I don't think most people realize how much of this goes into a food product, for example, before it reaches the public, at least in a responsible larger company. I don't think we see this very much in the fitness world. I've often said our business people aren't real business people. Artists aren't real artists. The scientists aren't real artists or aren't real scientists when it comes to rolling things out without due diligence. So the delays that I've felt bringing something like this coffee brew method to market for a population like lifters, like our listeners, it's reinforced that to me a lot. You don't just start telling people what to eat or how to lift without doing some of the background work, doing your homework, looking at their readiness to change, screening them for safety, periodically monitoring, the outcome. Are you getting what you want out of it? But it's too eager, right? You get people that are very excited in fitness when they're younger, especially, and they just roll out their own little method. They try to reinvent the wheel. Everything's a new revolution, new rules, new everything, and that's not how science usually works, and it's not very responsible. So those are three things that I'd like to just share this week, right, in this special episode, is 3 squares for fat loss. Again, stop eating, at least for a few hours here and there. Have we lost something, was the second lesson that I started to ponder. And number 3 is my appreciation for the legalities and the safety and the efficacy work that brings something to market. And again, I don't think the fitness world does that perhaps as much as they should. So having said that, I'm going to zip it. We'll go to break, and after the break, instead of a discussion, we're just going to check in with Phil, and he's going to share a little bit of news himself and some of the things that he has learned or achieved in the last couple of weeks. So take care, and we'll see you next week. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. IronRadio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming,
and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Good morning, everybody. Here we are on Iron Radio. This is Phil Stevens, powerlifter, strength coach, strength guild, amongst other things. Sitting here, everybody's on the road today, so I'm giving you my 2 cents here by myself. And I figured first, because it's kind of a hot topic, we would touch on the IPF proposed rule changes. Everybody's kind of up in a roar about this, but one thing to remember is they are just proposed rule changes. So, no need to get too crazy yet. I honestly think most of these rules are probably pretty spot on. That said, you're talking about the lifting federation that is probably the most nitpicky. They just have a tendency to, in my opinion anyways, go a little too far. Not lifters. Let lifters just lift. Get back to kind of the roots of powerlifting. But the argument is, they're trying to make it an Olympic sport, this and that. But anyways, they have the tendency to take it a bit too far, and some of these rules, they are doing just that. We'll just kind of run down the list here. I'm looking on a Reddit profile, and they're going over the rule changes. And number 1 on the proposed rule changes is add a female class around 95 or 96 kilograms. Yeah, this is great. I mean, the argument is the IWF recently added that, a new category for women, citing gender equality, equal opportunity for women to lift. And honestly, IWF was way too late in doing so. I mean, they were stuck at 75K for quite a while. For those of you that are kilo ignorant, that's, 165 pounds. So you're talking anything over 75K was a super. So that makes a huge difference. I had numerous lifters that were we were stuck in that class, because anything when you in powerlifting, when you go above that class, usually you go way above that class, and there's a huge difference in between a female that's 165 pounds and one that's 265 pounds. So anyways, IPF is proposing they add one as well, and it's either add the 95 or 96 category or revert back to the old weight classes, which had them going from 44 kilograms up to 90 and 90 plus. So 90 being 198. So I think it's a great idea. I don't know anybody who would argue against this, especially with the way women are headed now. Like, I have one female that's going to be a super, and she's like 200 and I think she weighs 208 now, and she's like 6'3" and very well put together. So, and she'll be a super. But with her, we know that, okay, we're going to be a super, so we need to keep adding weight. But for those girls that are stuck in that 180 around there, there's no reason, in my opinion, that they should have to be supers. There are women that are definitely built to be very optimal around that weight. So the next one people are I've seen a couple people poo-poo is minimum totals for international events, and I just can't understand why you would be against this. It's an international event. If you can't get the total, you can't go. It's not a go to a local event. If you want to go to the international events, get better. get the total. And I don't know, there was an argument about well, some smaller countries may not be able to make it. Well, that's not our fault. They get better. Just because you live in I don't know where, Zimbabwe or something, and there's 4 powerlifters in the whole country, it doesn't excuse you from getting better and being at a certain level to be at the international stage. That happens in weightlifting too. There, you have to hit a certain total to go to a national event or an international event, and you get pulled onto the team. So, I mean, it's just part of the game. This isn't in this day of participation trophies and everything else. It's just like you don't just automatically get to go to an international event because you're from an international country. You should be able to stack up, and if you can't cut the mustard, then you need to go elsewhere. Knee sleeves. So, Denmark proposed a new rule concerning knee sleeves in classic powerlifting. They want the technical controller will ask the lifter upon entering the platform to pull the knee sleeves down and the knee sleeve up again in front of the controller. The reason for this: classic powerlifting was introduced to get rid of supportive equipment. It's IPF's way of having a class that doesn't have suits and things like that. For them, there is no wrapped raw category. So if you have wraps on, you're in single ply. So, but anyways, it has been seen by numerous coaches in competition and other athletes, people using things such as hair dryers to heat up knee sleeves, to be able to put them on to the point that after they lift, you have to cut them off. Of course, like anything else, you give people an inch and they're going to take a yard. Knee sleeve construction has come a long ways in the last few years. Knee sleeve competing has become very popular. Knee sleeves have come to the point they are much like, I would argue they're on the level of old wraps in many ways, if you do like many people are, and sizing down, meaning stuffing 50 pounds of potatoes into a 25-pound bag and having 4 or 5 people pull them on. That's the other thing that they've seen, observed, is people having to have numerous handlers help them get their knee sleeves on. Yeah, I don't see a problem with this. I mean, if you can't put them on, then don't wear them, or just step up and compete with wraps. So, I mean, I don't think it'll slow competition any. All you got to do is have your knee sleeves down. I wear knee sleeves almost every day that I squat and deadlift to keep my knees warm, and I can grab them and pull them up. I mean, it takes some pulling, but it doesn't take me more than 5 seconds. So let's say it takes me 5 seconds a knee. It's my turn. They call me to the platform. It takes me 10 seconds to pull my knee sleeves up real quick. Then I address the bar and make my lift. I don't see an issue with that. So, yeah, and I mean, like me, I don't compete. I compete in wraps. I'll always compete in wraps. It's just what powerlifting has always been to me. I've been doing it for 20 years, and I compete wraps raw. So in the federations I lift in, it's called classic raw. But yeah, I mean, I think the knee sleeve thing has gotten a little crazy, and it's people. It started out as a new way to set records, and now there's not a lot of difference. So, I mean, they fit like a lighter wrap used to. I'm not going to say they're as strong as a heavy wrap, because they're obviously not. But I don't see an issue in this. I think it's an easily judged rule. I don't think it'll take away from the sport at all. I think it'll probably even the playing field, because yes, you need to be able to, let's say you don't have 14 handlers on your team, and you don't have 4 people to help you pull on each knee sleeve. It evens that competition up. Each person has to be able to pull it on themselves. I guess the only thing that would change this is if you had like superior grip strength or something, and you're able to grab onto your knee sleeves and pull them up better than Joe over there, who doesn't have as good a grip as you. But it's still, Joe can get a little better grip if he wants to be able to pull them up easily. But I don't see a problem with that. This next one, I think, is just not a very good rule, and it's worded poorly, and it's just going to go bad. The words "as flat as possible" to be added to the rules of bench, and no feet on the bench to assist getting an arch. So, then bench shall be placed on the platform with the head facing the front angle 45 degrees. The lifter must lie as flat as possible on his back with head, shoulders, buttocks in contact with the bench surface. The feet must be flat on the floor, as flat as the shape of the shoe will allow. The lifter is not allowed to put up the feet on the bench surface in the purpose to make it easier to reach an arch. His hands and fingers must grip the bar proportion, blah 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 blah. So the lifter's feet are not allowed to touch each other underneath the bench either. So anyways, anytime you add in subjectivity to a rule, you are asking for problems. What is as flat as possible? So I just see this ending poorly, and I see it as just, it's going to say nothing but issues, because you're going to have people arguing, well, that is as flat as I go, with my feet flat. So I think the whole people bitching about an arch it's just tiresome. Generally, the only people that bitch about people with a big arch are people that can't do a big arch. And if those people could do a big arch, they would do a big arch. I myself cannot do one. I've got a short torso and I'm a thicker guy. Most bigger guys just can't arch. You know what we do instead? We get stronger. Some of the lighter class women, of course, are very bendy and flexible, and they're able to get into an extreme arch, and then they go extreme wide grip. It's just the nature of the sport now. It's been around for a while. I don't know how you're going to change it. I don't think there is a way you can easily change it, unless you just took out the as flat as possible and just said you have to lift with a flat back. But I mean, I see issues with that too, because if we're engaging our lats correctly and things like that as we should, there is going to be some arch to the bench. If not, you're asking for injuries. So I think this rule will get shut down. I don't think it's going to happen. You would have too many people pissed off, and you're entering in too many another variable. And whenever you enter variables, you're also entering favoritism, possibility for favoritism, and things like that. Where, well, Sally was arched 1/4 inch more than I was, and mine got turned down and hers didn't. And it was like, it's just bad. It's just a bad idea. So, this next one is just an obvious rule to me. If you bomb on a lift you don't continue to the next disciplines at international events. I don't know when this changed. Even at local events, this used to be what happened. If you came out and bombed your squat, guess what? You were done for the day. You just didn't get to go on, because you didn't put up a total. So, and that was the whole purpose of the meet. There wasn't much of this bench only, deadlift only, and things like that. It was, we're here to compete in powerlifting. You can no longer put up total, so guess what? Just go home. There was no point. You didn't even want to keep going. You bombed. So, and I see, and this is they're the only one to change this in international events. So what's the issue here, people? And I can see it. I've let lifters go at my events that were new lifters, just so they didn't have a horrible first experience. And we were at a small local event. They bomb out on their squat, which is usually the most usual one that people bomb out on, because they go high or whatever. And we let them go on so they don't have a horrible day. But if you're at the international level, you should probably have your ducks in a row, and you've done these meets a few times. You should be able to call an opener that it sufficiently gets you an attempt in. And if you don't, see you later. We're going to cut the meet a little short. It'll help the speed of the meet. So it's your own fault, and you're not putting up a total. So yeah, I don't know why that rule is questioned at all. So basically, there's two rules in there that I think that one will go. I don't know why that one wouldn't pass. I don't know why the minimum totals for international events wouldn't pass, and the add the female class wouldn't pass. Those three things I think will go on through. The knee sleeves, we'll see. There's a lot of money now involved in IPF and USAPL powerlifting, and most of that money now comes from sponsorships, and those sponsorships come from approved gear. And many of these approved gear places sell things like knee sleeves, and they want their knee sleeves to still be sold. And guess what? IPF still wants their money. They're in it for the money. I don't care what anybody says. It's not a charitable organization. There are people making good money running the federation, so they don't want to screw that up. And I think then the other one that I don't think will go anywhere is probably the bench as flat as possible. They're going to have to rethink that one if they want to change it. I could see them maybe adding in the don't put the feet on the bench thing, but I don't know. And the feet not being able to touch each other under the bench. That's kind of always been a thing. I got called on that like 14 years ago because I had a bad hip and my feet did come in there. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at on that. And I was going to see if there's anything else. We've also had a few questions on the listener page going up. So, we'll see if we got anything there that I want to touch on real quick. Yeah, we had one guy talk about the dangers of using an open grip or a false grip in the bench press because the bar could slip from your hands if you don't have a thumb holding it in place in your palm. And he started a poll and asked if people thought that was dangerous. And it's a resounding 81% yes and 19% no. Personally, I think you're not very smart if you think no, that it couldn't be dangerous. That said, I'm not saying that not to do it. I personally use a false grip. Do I think it's potentially dangerous? Yes. So is jumping from an airplane. But people do that all the time. I mean, going out riding motocross or anything like that. But I think it's part of the sport. I like what it does for me. It allows me not to be so internally rotated. I get a firm grip on the bar. I'm able to flex my lats a little harder. And I have less wrist, shoulder, and elbow pain. That in itself, I'm a competitor. Those things outweigh the possibility of the bar flying out of my hands. And that said, I've seen numerous videos of where people did have a thumb grip and the bar flew out of their hands with a bent bar or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's potentially dangerous. We've all seen the videos. But I've also seen thousands and hundreds of thousands of lifts made without it. And nowadays, at least at meets, most meets have safety catches. So if a bar is dumped, it doesn't crush you. Maybe start training at a gym that has that. Because, I mean, I don't even think spotters can fix that. That's such a split-second thing. I've seen bars dumped, and spotters don't have a reaction time of 1/100th of a second. So, but yeah, it's just part of the sport. If you're scared of it, don't do it. If you're not scared of it, or just you're able to accept that, roll with it. So, and I think that's all I got for you today as far as news and things like that. We will walk on to the topic of the day now, which Lonnie has informed me we're all going to record. It's going to be recent achievements. The top 3 things we've learned in the last month. Oh, I have to learn 3 things in the last month. Okay. And we will go to that here in just 1 second. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Okay. Recent achievements. Oh, man. Recent achievements for me. I don't know. I'm training well. Training's going real well. I'm squatting more than I ever have. So, that's a good thing. Give you some gym talk here. Everybody kind of knows me. I've been through the ringer. Been competing for a long time. Not too long ago, I had hip replacement surgery, which, just to inform new listeners, that had nothing, well, we'll say very little to do with my sporting life and more to do with an injury as a child. I was ran over and broke my pelvic bone in my hip structure in 16 places. And they informed me then that later in life, I would need a hip replacement because it was like a car running on bad alignment. I had that done. It's been about 3 years ago. And then about a year after that, I tore my hamstring from the bone. So that's been about 2 years ago. I've been back. I've competed twice. So I squatted 700 in my last meet. Squatted 650 in the meet before that. And this meet, as everything's going as as well as can be. I'm about 15 weeks out, and I'm hoping to open about 700 and take a stab at 800. So everything's rolling good, hitting lots of lifts at the gym. I'll tell you what, this leads into what I've learned. The first thing I've learned, and I guess just reinforce this with myself and other lifters, is know when to walk away. Like last weekend, I was hoping to go in, and the plan was to squat 600 against strong bands. I get to, because the weekend before that I hit like 540 for a triple. I get warming up and things just feel bad, and I keep going and things still feel bad. We get the bands on, okay, I'm moving. We get 315 on in the strong bands, which should be just really simple weight for me, and it was bad. It was horrible. I was shaking this and that, and you know what I did? Instead of just getting pissed off and saying let's do this thing, I played it smart and walked away. I just walked away. And I've had a few of my lifters now, I told them, I see a bad day, it's better off to walk away. One of the calls for this though is where we're at. I'm like 15 weeks out. It's okay. I have time to walk away. I'm also in a mental position now that that's okay. I'm not doing everything I can to that I would be, say, 5-6 weeks out. You get that close to meets, and at least for me and my lifters, I try to enforce this. It's a little hard. I don't have control of them outside of the facility. 5-6 weeks out, my whole life starts revolving around this coming competition. So I do everything I can outside of the facility to make sure that I'm set up to have a good training days, because I have numbers that I have to hit at that point. It's not numbers I want to hit. It's numbers I have to hit the numbers I expect. So right now I'm still in that area where it's like, it'll be neat to hit this. You know, if I hit this, I'll be in a good spot here in 10 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, it's good to walk away. The other thing that I've reinforced in my own mind, again, it's not something I just learned, but it's that something we've preached quite a bit, and I've just seen really showing its teeth recently. It's 80%, man. If we can get your 80% to go up and you can crush things, the rest of you is getting stronger without having to go there. So a lot of the work we're doing is really crushing 80% and making it look good and earn our way up from there. Taking smart stabs up, only if you're feeling good. But if we get our work in at that 80% range, and we're constantly crushing it, and that 80% is rising, we know we're heading in the right direction without needing to creep into that 90, 95, 100% range. We very rarely go in that range. Even on, let's say we're doing conjugate style training, which what I'm doing now is loosely based on that. Even on that, we're looking to hit an 8, like an RPE of 8 on most of our days. So it's something that's hard, but you still have a little left in the hole. Let's say like a couple weeks ago, it was max 5 versus strong bands, and we're not going up to that failure. I don't preach it. This will be our last lesson. It's things we've learned. It's don't fail. Like I can't stress that enough. I push not failing to all my athletes. We don't push things to failure. And usually that's a pretty easy thing to call, because a lifter's going to hit something and they're like, oh, what do you think I should do? Should I go up? And you can already see it in their eyes. They haven't bought into that going up. They think they'll probably fail. So we don't try it. There's no point in that. Not in this situation. Not in a training situation. And the more we do that, the more they get in their head that the more they win, the more they don't fail, the more that's all they know. And when that's all we know, then what starts to happen is no matter what I tell them to put on the bar, they know they can do. And now you're sitting in a comfortable position. If you mentally know as you're coming to a bar that I got this, there's a really, really, really good chance that you got this, even if it's like 110%, because your head's on your side. And that's something that I try to get all my lifters to gain. And sometimes that takes time. We want you approaching that bar just knowing I'm going to fucking crush this thing. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to kill this because that's what I do. That's all I know. That's all we've done in the gym. We go in and crush things. We go in and hit our 80%, and then we go up and we crush things. We stop that. Like this week, I did 5 sets of 3 on deadlift. Things were feeling amazing. So my choice after that, after my volume work was done, was I'm going to take a few stabs up to something that's still fast. So I just worked up to a pretty quick 600 in deadlift and called it there. I was like, that's enough today. I'm 15 weeks out. I don't need to go over 600. I'm going to, the plan is open around 7. But I'm just looking to give fast volume and work on form, things like that. And over the weeks, it's just, from continually crushing things, it feels better. Mentally, you come in, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. It was easy last week. You're just crushing it. So that would be my 3 rules, 3 things I've learned that have been reinforced to me lately through myself and my other lifters. There's no one to walk away. Like me and one of my other lifters were talking about this. He was feeling bad the other day, went in and pushed through it, and he kind of strained his groin a little bit. Not a big injury, but if he was smart enough to just walk away, like I did the following week, he saw me do the following week, he wouldn't have missed a week of training. So, know when to walk away. Crush your 80%. Look to consistently raise that 80% up higher. And don't fail. There's times and places it goes for big lifts, and failure is going to happen, and you need to have a very short memory when that happens. Don't let it eat at you, but don't aim for it. Don't take training sessions, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, we're working up to failure at heavy lifts today. Working up to failure on a heavy sets of 10 or 15 or whatever. Yeah, whatever. That doesn't mess with you mentally. Working up to failure on heavy lifts where you don't get the prescribed reps, in my opinion, is a bad thing. I would rather see you hit multiple sets where you crush them. So those would be my 3 lifts. I hope everybody has a good weekend. I'm going to go in now and finish drinking my coffee, eat a couple donuts, and go lift. So thanks a lot. Bye.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the store, so we try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, you know is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers,
and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.